Evening, everybody. It's lovely to see our panel joined us and everybody's in situ and ready to roll with our lightning talks. I've been to a number of these so far and they are absolutely so inspiring. So I look forward to an evening together with all of you. Dawn is the most amazing interviewer, so we welcome Dawn. She's fantastic. I am Sharon Constanson. I am chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, and we are hosting the lightning talks that are being held by the West Country division of the chamber. And welcome all of you. I see we've got people from all over the world that are joining us, which is absolutely fantastic. The chamber is up to all sorts of mischief these days, and one of our current mischiefs is we are going to be raising funds for the Solidarity Fund. And we're looking forward to all of you joining us, raising money for a good cause, but most importantly, all getting together over the bank holiday weekend in the UK at the end of this month and walking and doing things that are positive and taking physical action and actually enjoying ourselves and helping the lives of other South Africans. But that's not why we're here. We're here to listen to Dawn and to her team of amazing people who've got their own story to share about their life and about their business and the messages they want to share with you. So I leave you now in Dawn's capable hands, and please use the Q&A line, which I think she will tell you about. And if there's any questions that you've got that you specifically want us to address, please let us know. And from the Chamber side, welcome to all of you. Dawn, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. You know, they say, well, I decided that great things come in threes. And they also say that a night sky of lightning leaves a lasting impression. So if we bring those two things together, we have three speakers, 5 minutes each of lightning to leave a lasting impression with you this evening. And we're going to start off with Paul Gardner. And Paul is the CEO of the Mantis Collection and the Bear Grylls Survival Academy. And he's going to share about growing up in a world of conservation and how he is engaging his network to be the voice of conservation post-COVID.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Sharon. It's a pleasure to be on here. Thank you for all the listeners tuning in tonight. It's a great honor to be on this platform. So thank you so much. So, I mean, I'm going to briefly, obviously I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to crack on. But basically, my journey in conservation. So when I was at boarding school in the very early 1990s, my father always wanted to own a patch of land in Africa. Of course, as all South Africans, I think we want to do that, you know. And so he had grown up in Zimbabwe, and he was just looking for a little patch of Africa somewhere. And my brother and I were at boarding school in Grahamstown in South Africa, and the folks lived in Port Elizabeth. And he stumbled upon a piece of land in the Eastern Cape. And it was 1,000 acres, very small. And it was a retreat for us to meet on weekends. And there was a hell of a drought at the time, like one of these classic 100-year-old droughts where nothing, you know, there was zero rainfall and the farmers were just dropping like flies. And so the next farmer said to Dad, can you buy my piece of land? And then the next guy and the next guy. But before he knew it, he had 10 farms. And he thought, okay, I've got to do something with this because this is draining my wallet. And it's all very not well having all this land with sheep, goats, and cattle and nothing else. And the land had completely been decimated over the years. And what Dad did was he stumbled upon a book which had been published by a professor from Rhodes University called C.J. Skeed. And this particular gentleman had published all the original manuscripts of the British settlers that had settled in 1820 in the Eastern Cape. And the reason why they had settled there was because of the Napoleonic Wars that were happening. And there was a huge socio-economic crisis post the Napoleonic Wars in the 1800s. And so Britain had a huge problem. And what did they do with their population in terms of, you know, offering them opportunity? And the opportunity was to go to South Africa. So 6,000 of them arrived in Algoa Bay in Port Elizabeth. And each of them were handed an ox wagon and a head of oxen, and they were told to head off into the interior and settle their land. And they would travel with these great big Bibles. And in the back of those Bibles, they had document absolutely everything that they encountered, from African tribes to the wildlife and everything else. And so C.J. Skeed, fast forward 200 years, had published a book with all those settlers, original settler encounters. And that was the blueprint for Dad, because Dad said, okay, wow, I didn't realize elephants and rhinos and buffaloes, lions had existed in the Eastern Cape. And they're all documented by the British settlers. And so that was the blueprint for a game reserve called Shamwari, which Dad founded back in 1992 when the doors opened. And so it was fascinating to see what he had to get up to. As a youngster, I was exposed to him bringing all these species back. Nobody else had done it. The only other people in the world that were bringing back animals like this were the Yellowstone National Park. They were the first people to rewild, and we were probably one of the first in Africa to start rewilding. So it was kind of a whole new era. And then suddenly Dad said, right, we've got to commercialize this. How are we going to sustain all the money that I've spent on this project? And so he had to develop lodges, and he fixed up a lot of the original British settler homes and started re-establishing those. And then we had to go out and find the business. Now, if you know what was happening in 1992 when the doors to Shamwari opened, is the country was pretty much on the brink of a civil war. And I know Steve's going to allude to that because part of his story is about that era. And it was hairy time in our country. And of course, we had the 1994 elections, and Mandela was voted in. And then, of course, 1995 happened. We hosted the Rugby World Cup. The world was watching, and we pulled off the successful event, aside from winning the thing. And the floodgates to tourism opened. And Shamwari was then the closest game reserve to Cape Town. And it was the closest, I mean, it was malaria-free. We coined that phrase. And so it was quite smart marketing. And we were just, it was all about location, 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 but with this very rich story of conservation and rewilding. And the rest is history. Our family's been involved now in hospitality and conservation for 30 years. And we went on this incredible journey, and we met amazing people on the journey, because when you get involved in the world of conservation, the doors open to fascinating people. You know, Dad and I and Mom included have met Sir David Attenborough. We've met the princes over here in the UK. We've met celebrities, and it's just, and then we always try and get them involved in conservation, because that's the opportunity. I think you've got to leverage that. So, you know, it came with a lot of hardship, but when it worked, it was amazing. And in 2000, it was time for us to put a brand over the group, because you know, from 1992 when we opened to 2000, we ended up with about 10 hotels. And it was time to put a brand on top of this collection that we developed. And we came up with the name Mantis, after the prey mantis, the little insect. And we could have gone with the Platinum Collection or whatever. And we came up with something quite unusual, because the mantis is one of the only insects found on 6 of the 7 continents. And the acronym is a beautiful one. It's man and nature together is sustainable. And we use that as part of our DNA today. So we have a great little collection today called Mantis, and we're on all 7 continents, because we've got the only lodge on the planet on the continent of Antarctica, and we've got other properties around the world today, and each of them sort of have that bit of DNA woven into them in terms of conservation, and that's kind of where we're going today as a group. And then fast forward to 2017, we got a knock on the door, and it was Aqua Hotels. And if you're not familiar with them, they are the 2nd largest hotel group in the world. So Marriott being number 1, then it's these guys, and then Hilton, and so on and so forth. And they approached us and they said, you know, we want to really get into Africa, because we see Africa as the opportunity. And they stepped into Africa with us. They bought half of us. And the other piece for them was that they suddenly acquired an eco brand. And, you know, Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, Radisson, none of them have an eco brand within their portfolio. And so we're the flag that they wave today. And particularly now, coming out of this COVID situation, I think there's going to be a big emergence of a conscious traveler. And so we're hoping that Mantis pulls through, and we're ready on the other side for this new conscious traveler that evolves out of this mess that we're currently in, because obviously we've been hard hit by. So that's the future. But, you know, I think the trigger points for me in my life were, and my life in conservation, obviously I'd seen all this amazing stuff that Dad and our team had achieved in terms of rewilding. And then suddenly the world of poaching arrived in the Eastern Cape, and we lost our first rhino, and the rest is history. You know, we were losing 1,000 rhinos a year. But an awful moment in my life was experiencing this carcass. We approached it. This female had been shot, and the vet had to do an autopsy for forensic reasons. He has to find the bullet so they can trace it to the weapon that shot the rhino. And ultimately track the people down that did this. And while he was doing the autopsy, the guts burst open, and this poor female was pregnant. And of course, there was this stillborn baby that popped out, and that was such a trigger point for me. And so my next chapter in my life is taking what I've learned over these 30 years, and I'm forming a whole platform now, because my two passions in life are running. I'm a long distance runner, and I love it. Since the age of 12, I've been into my running, and it sorts out lots of issues in my life. It's when I do all my creative thinking. And then my other passion is obviously conservation. So I recently, and we're going to create this platform, but I recently took a guest out to South Africa pre-COVID. He's a celebrity guest over here. He's a big adventurer. Took him down to the Eastern Cape, and we had a film crew follow us around, and we were on foot constantly. We were jogging to different things, and we darted a rhino, and we dehorned the rhino, and then we suddenly with an anti-poaching unit, and I dressed him up in one of those suits, and the dogs tackled him. And then we went down to the beach, and we did a beautiful beach cleanup on our beautiful, pristine beaches. There was still a fair amount to clean up, believe it or not. And then we went running underwater with South Africa's top freediver. So it's a series now, which we're going to be launching very soon, called Natural Born Runners. And the idea is to take celebrities into Africa, not necessarily just South Africa. We'll do the gorillas next in Rwanda. And we do it while on foot, while jogging around that country, meeting various people involved in conservation. And of course, it's all about places, faces, and species. And so that's the next journey in my life. It's taking what we've learned, taking it and turning it into a passion project, and just preaching to the world about what's going on, so that we, in a post-COVID world, really start waking up to what's going on. Funny enough, on Friday next week, I'm taking one of the Spice Girls up Snowdon, believe it or not. And so I'm hoping to get, and that's not part of my thing, it's part of what she's doing, but I'm really hoping that I can get her to come down to South Africa with me, so that we can go and do something exciting together in terms of a natural born run. So that's my story.
That sounds fantastic. And, for the 200 years of the settlers, the 1820 settlers, I live in a town in Somerset called Frome, and I've discovered 54 of those settlers left from Frome, this town of 27,000 people. I've connected the families on that side with the families here to trace the DNA. And there's still families in this area here that know that in their family tree, someone dropped off and went somewhere, and they don't know where they went. I know where they went.
Dawn, you may remember in South Africa in 1986, there was one of the first ever reality shows in the world, and it was called The Volunteers. And they reenacted the arrival of the 1820 settlers in the Eastern Cape. And these families had to survive in the Bushman's River Valley for 6 months. It was one of the first ever. Before the Americans or anybody else had cottoned onto reality, the South Africans pioneered it. And I tried to redo that series for the 1820, for the 200th anniversary, 2020, which would have happened this year. And I approached quite a few production companies in the UK to try and get British families to go and do it, but it never happened. But
I'm up for that.
Yeah,
I'm up for that. I'm going to come and talk to you, because I really want to. I'm not even from 1820 settler stock, but I love the history. So
I love the history too. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you, Paul. And next up, we've got Hayley. And Hayley Weinberg is the founder of Hayley Joy Plus Size Clothing, and she discusses how she makes a difference while earning a living.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Thank you for the invite as well. Making a difference and making a living. Yeah. At the age of 16, a vocational guidance counselor told me that making a difference and making a living wasn't possible. She'd asked me what I wanted to do when I left school, and I said, I want to go and make a difference. And she said, well, that's very nice and all very airy-fairy, but actually, unless you're a trust fund baby or you marry a rich man, not feasible. And I mean, at 16, I didn't really know much about trust fund babies or marrying rich men, but I did know that I wanted to make a difference. Anyway, I left school, and I'd had a passion for fashion from a very early age when I dressed Barbie dolls. So I enrolled in a fashion design and management technology course at Wits Technikon in Johannesburg. And it was an amazing, amazing journey. I had incredible lecturers who had worked in the industry. So they weren't airy fairy. They were really like good stock from the clothing factories. And in my first year out of home and out of school, I had developed a very serious hormone issue. And back in the day, they didn't really know how to fix those things. So they just threw drugs at it until they found something that worked. And in the throwing of drugs at it, I picked up a lot of weight. And I'd left school weighing 49 kilos. I'd never had a weight issue. So I didn't really, it wasn't in my DNA to worry about weight. And suddenly I'd gone from 49 kilos to 75 kilos. And it was incredibly traumatic because there was nothing. There was no store, there was no range, there was no awareness, there was nothing around plus size fashion when I was 19 years old. And I had to start making my own clothes because there really wasn't anything to buy. And it was, the reality of the situation for me was that whole thing around walking into a store and the sales lady going, oh, sorry, those only go up to a size 14. And then walking out and going, okay, so if they only go up to a size 14, what am I going to do? Anyway, I started making my own clothing, and I suddenly had all these women start coming up to me at parties and clubs, restaurants, and they weren't inquisitive or they weren't confident in how they were asking me. They were desperate. And I just had that moment where I realized that there was a huge gap in the market. And I thought, okay, well, there's where I can go and make a difference and make a living at the same time. Sorry, Miss Vocational Guidance Teacher, I think you're going to be wrong on this one. I started sewing in my second year. I come from an entrepreneurial family. My dad was a good old-fashioned entrepreneur. And I just started sewing and started making clothes. And then I started building a clientele. And deep into my second year, I was dressing women of size. I left college and I got a job. So we were very lucky. In our third year of college, we were approached and we were offered jobs. And I went to work for a company. And after 2 months, I phoned my dad and I said, I can't do this. And he's like, what do you mean you can't do this? I said, no, I can't work for somebody else. He's like, you have to stay there and you have to learn at somebody else's expense. Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very expensive lesson for a very long time. I said, I can't. He said, okay, that's fine. But if you leave your job, don't call me at the end of the month for the rent money because there ain't no rent money. And my dad was one of those, he was an old-fashioned father. He bought me everything I needed to get me on my feet, but he wasn't going to pay the rent if I wasn't going to have a job. So that was my motivation. So off I went on my own and I set up in my little flat in Illovo in Johannesburg and I started sewing for a clientele. And I did that for 20 years. And then I gave up smoking at the age of 40. And I had a breakdown. I had a complete and utter breakdown. I hit the wall, I went splat. And this was the girl who never believed in those kind of things. Like, get a grip, get up, get it together. You don't have breakdowns. And I literally could not get out of bed for 3 months. I was bluer than blue. I just was in a really bad space. Somebody gave me the number of a woman and she said, I think you should call this lady. And it was very alternate therapy. And I had just decided that I needed to go deep. I needed to see what was going on because I knew that there were issues. And her and I worked really hard together. And she kept asking me the question. She kept saying, if I freed you from the trap that you feel you're in, working at home and, it's lonely and all of that, what would you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And for weeks on end, I didn't know. And then one day she asked me and I said, I want to go and create a space where women of all shapes and sizes feel honored. And she looked at me and she said, when I see you next week, I want you to have signed a lease and I want to see you in your own store. Anyway, later on that week, I signed a lease on 140 square meters for 5 years. I never asked anybody's advice. I just went off. I knew that it was the right thing to do. And I went back the following week and she said, and? I said, and I signed a lease and I'm moving in 2 months. And it was the best thing that ever happened because I got to create a space. I created a space that I wanted to shop in. So as a plus size woman, I wanted to be able to go to a place where I wasn't embarrassed. I was honored. I didn't have one rail in the corner that serviced me. The whole store was for me. And I did that. But initially we only started we only started sizing up to a 2XL. And I thought I was doing fabulous things by going up to a 2XL. And then I started having women of like much larger than 2XL coming to the store. And I could see the disappointment because it was like and I couldn't get it done fast enough. But eventually we got it where we sized from a generous small all the way up to a 7XL. And my greatest joy was that thing of being able to, when a woman walked in and said, there's nothing that's going to fit me here. And me being able to say, if you just allow me, if you just give me a little bit of time, I promise you that I will dress you and I will show you that there is clothing that will fit you. And I opened the store. I sized up to a 7XL. And I've been in my store for 15 years. I signed another 5-year lease, and then I signed another lease. And tomorrow we actually vacate the store. So we have decided, our lease came up at the end of June, and we have decided that we are going to move on. We are moving up into a showroom space. And we're doing business very differently now. A lot of my clients are older, so a lot of them are still, we've been locked down in South Africa for, it feels like for 500 years. Just crazy. But a lot of my clients are still home-based and are not traveling and are not going to stores. So we're doing a lot via WhatsApp, a lot via Facebook Lives, obviously on our online store. And I'm actually really enjoying setting like that because I get to engage with each client one-on-one, because when they place the order, we get into conversations and then there are questions around, do you do this and can you do that? And my arms are bigger or my legs are longer, or I've got a big tummy but a flat bum and all of those. So I'm able to glean from them as well. And also having worked on the floor in the store for 15 years, I've been able to understand a lot more. And as much as I'm a plus size woman, I get to understand when I'm having these deep conversations with these clients. And yeah, today I make a difference and I make a living and I love every single minute of my job, which I don't see it as a job. I just see it as I'm incredibly blessed to do what I love and make a difference and make a living, Miss Vocational Guidance Teacher.
Do you know, my vocational guidance teacher taught my mother in 1959 and then me in 1989 when I was in matric. And I thought, well, what do you know about the world out there?
Yeah.
Happy birthday to you, Hayley. And Paul, your daughter's birthday as well today, isn't it?
It is, and mine was last week. So happy birthday, Hayley.
And mine was on the 19th. So, you know.
Oh, right. Look at that. Lots of Cancerians here.
Yeah. I'm the Leo. Yeah, I'm the Leo.
You're Leo.
Of course, the Leo.
Yeah.
Cancerians get on with Cancerians. So there you go.
So
thank you so much, Hayley, for sharing that. And you know, I just love that you found what you do, because a lot of people spend their lives doing a job forever and aren't happy, and then they just are there biding their time. And I think that's fantastic that you found what you wanted to do. So thank you very much. And then we've got our third this evening is Stephen Goodman, who's founder of Top Colleges and host of a television talk show about education in Washington in the US. Stephen will share his story about being, wait for it, an Africa Hinterland passenger. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve.
Well, thank you, Dawn, and thank you to all of us for being part of this. And Hayley, that was very interesting to talk about the honor that that you were talking about, and I can certainly understand that. And Paul, thank you for sharing your comments about conservation, which is, of course, what I thought I was going to be experiencing when I went on Africa Hinterland in the first place. And to a certain extent, I did. I just didn't know about the gun running. In fact, that's a good way to kind of start this, I think. So let's start with early last year. Early last year, I was in London, and I went to the Nelson Mandela exhibit by the South Bank Center with somebody who had been a former gun runner. And we had a very pleasant afternoon, and I enjoyed it very much. I thought he was very interesting, and it was something I had never done before. But why was I doing this? And so maybe we could kind of step back a little bit and frame this. So in the early 90s, I was working at the University of the Western Cape, and I was doing legal work and justice work. And after I finished, I decided that I was going to take a mini vacation. And my girlfriend and I decided that we were going to take a safari. And we ended up signing up for something called Africa Hinterland. And it sounded like it was going to be great. We were going to go through parts of South Africa, parts of Zimbabwe, parts of Botswana. And I was very excited about it. And so we signed up, and then it just turned out that I went to see a show at the Market Theatre in Johannesburg. And that show, I happened to chat with Joe Slovo during the intermission, and we ended up having a very intense conversation about torture. He was a very casual guy, of course. So so we ended up talking about torture during intermission. Anyway, that was that, and I didn't think much about that conversation for many years. And then what happened is that, I went on this safari, and I had a very powerful experience, and I really enjoyed it very much. And it was the first time I was in the African bush, and just a really powerful, profound experience. And as you can tell from my accent, I'm not from the UK or South Africa originally. So this was a very, very, very special experience. So anyway, many years later, I became the host of a talk show called Higher Education Today. And one of the things that I started to do was do tapings around different places about the education space. And one thing led to another, and I ended up scheduling a taping at Lily's Leaf in Rivonia. And in Rivonia, what I did was I scheduled such and such time that I was going to do this taping, and we were running a little bit behind, and so I decided to take a stroll through the grounds. And as I was strolling, I saw this big pavilion, and in the pavilion was a safari truck that looked just like the one that I had been on 25 years earlier. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. So I couldn't figure out why. Well, it turned out that I ended up learning that Africa Hinterland was actually a gun running operation to bring in weapons. The MK had arranged to bring in weapons into South Africa, literally underneath the seats of unsuspecting tourists. And 25 years later, I was learning for the first time that I had actually been one of those unsuspecting tourists. So I was a bit surprised by this, of course, as you can imagine. And of course, I was about to do a taping. And ironically, the taping was about history. And we ended up calling it the State of History. And so the immediate question I had was what to do with this. Should I include it in the segment or not include it? So I decided that we were going to include it. And I basically stood in front of the truck, and I pointed to the truck, and I said, this is where I live off this truck. And we ended up doing the segment. Anyway, I was very surprised still about this. And so I ended up learning that there was actually a documentary done about this. And I didn't know about that. And I watched the documentary. And in the documentary, I learned that a lot of this was arranged out of London, and that there was a businessman and there was a 19-year-old from Nuneaton who was the first driver of the truck. Anyway, I thought this was all fascinating. So fascinating, in fact, that I actually wrote a song about it called Safari Surprise. So wherever you listen to your songs on YouTube or Spotify, you can go ahead and listen to it if you want. But after I kind of realized that I learned all of this, I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to talk to that first driver? And through a series of a fair amount of research, I tracked this driver down, and his name is Stuart Round. And so many people on this call probably know Stuart because he is involved with the South African Chamber of Commerce in the UK. And he was the person who I was walking through that exhibit with in London. Now, one of the things about, and I'll let him speak for himself, that he's more than capable of doing that. But I wanted to talk to, if I may, what it was to kind of understand somebody's motivation who was on the same team. He was anti-apartheid. I was anti-apartheid. That's why I went to South Africa in the first place, to work on the anti-apartheid community. But he operated in a very different arena, and one that was not in sync with what I thought I believed, and I still don't believe. But one of the interesting things about getting to know Stuart was that it really helped me to become a better host, because I had to understand why he did what he did. And it really helped me to see that not everybody, maybe this is a simple message and a simple lesson, but it helped me realize that not everybody has the same goals. And even if people do have similar goals, they don't always go about doing those goals in the same way. And it forced me to realize and come to terms with the fact that sometimes you have to listen to other people, even though you may not appreciate or agree with what they did, even though you're on the same team. And so in a very strange, indirect way, learning about this truck and learning and getting to know Stuart, and we've gotten together on a number of occasions in London, has helped me to become a better talk show host, because now I'm not trying to just understand what people do. I'm trying to understand why they do what they do, and giving people time and the respect to explain what it is that they have done and why they've done what they've done. So the lesson that I'd like to share, and I'm happy to do that and take questions. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm happy to take questions about it. But my lesson from this is that we may not all agree, but I think as human beings, we need to respect one another and appreciate that people come at things from different ways, and that we need to be open to listening to other people and respecting people's views, even if they're not the views that we ourselves would do, whether it's about a safari truck, whether it's about politics, whether it's about economics, whether it's about any subject. So that's the lesson that I've learned from this. And so in a very strange way, this Africa Hinterland story is just a bizarre story that just keeps on going and keeps on going. So thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much, Steve. That's incredible. And, how did it feel? I'm going to ask a question now before I open it up. If anybody does have questions, please just pop them forward. I have one for you, Paul, in a second. But Steve, when you realized what you'd been involved in, how did you feel? Did you feel proud? Were you shocked? Did you feel angry that you didn't know? How did you feel?
I felt all of those things, because the irony is that I was doing legal work. And so here I was in what I thought was a part of my time in South Africa that was anything but important, right? Because all I was doing was going with a girlfriend on a safari. But in fact, it turned out to be a really significant event, because as a lot of people on this call, I'm sure know, Lily's Leaf is an important place. The operation that MK ran, some people would say it did a lot of good, some people would say it didn't, but it was certainly a significant operation. And it was just bizarre to learn that I was part of this. And the other funny thing about it is I was about to go on air with the director of Lily's Leaf, a Wits professor, and Mbongeni Ngema, who is an interesting composer, and he himself was involved in all sorts of anti-apartheid stuff as well. And as someone who's not South African, I had to just process this instantly. So Dawn, to your question, I think it was all of those things. I'm still a little shocked about it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I would be too, but it's incredible. But then you realize that those that we think are insignificant moments, the impact they can have on our lives. And sometimes we just have to slow down and accept that they might change things, or they could be a part of the bigger picture, which is amazing. So Paul, I have a question for you from Ivor, who said, Paul, from someone who shares your passion for conservation and who has visited Shamwari, is Mantis doing anything to extend or establish counter poaching activities? For example, in conflict zones like the DRC and Mali, it feels like an uphill struggle. So it does seem to lack it's not very coherent, and especially to create something mutually supportive that's trans-regional and sharing best practices and that kind of thing?
I'll give you, thank you. I'll give you a good example of something that we did do, and I think it's having the desired effect. Is a few years ago, I was introduced to a pop star from Vietnam, and her name is Tu Minh. And Tu Minh, I encouraged her and her husband to come to South. I first flew out to Prague. They were based in Prague. And I flew out to meet them there, and I told her about the plight of the rhino and everything else. And the reason why I wanted her was because one of the biggest consumers of rhino horn are the Vietnamese. And so I enticed her out to South Africa, and we took her on a rhino procedure. We darted a rhino, we had to dehorn the rhino, and we did that whole procedure with her. And we just immersed her into the underworld of what was going on, because she didn't really understand it at all. And then, of course, she went back to Vietnam, a real ambassador to the cause. And she said, right, this is what we're going to do. Because the rhino horn is so sought after, and only wealthy families in Vietnam can really afford it, we're not going to target those adults. We're going to target the kids. And I'm going to go to all the independent schools across Vietnam, and we are going to do various things with those schools, run a competition. And we'll sponsor, because there are only 12 independent schools across the country. And we'll sponsor the winners of the competitions throughout the schools to fly to South Africa, and we'll take them on the experience I've just had. And so that's been running now for 3 or 4 years. And you're starting to see the curve of demand decline with rhinos. So there's an example of a project that actually has got legs. And if we had more funding, we could probably turn that into something huge and start doing that in China, because you can't continue the war on the ground in South Africa and beyond. You've got to sort out the demand reduction piece of this puzzle. Otherwise, the fight will go on forever. So that's an example of a pretty cool initiative that I think had impact and actually is having a positive effect. And so I think across Africa, I mean, you've almost got to focus on something and get that right first, because for us to take on Africa is a challenge. I mean, we've set up a foundation now. Since selling half of our business to Aqua, we set up the CCFA, which is the Community Conservation Fund for Africa. And the idea there is rather than us go set up projects ourselves, we're going to best in class. So we've gone to TUSC, we've gone to African Parks, and we've gone to the Wilderness Foundation. And we'll make so much noise abroad and raise, dollars that convert into so much more in Africa. Yeah. And we'll give it to those 3 NGOs, because we know that we've screened them, we've filtered out the guys that we feel are no good, and these guys are the top of the game. And so rather than us reinvent the wheel, we're gonna grant funding to them to do good work across the continent. But it's an uphill battle, because now with COVID, obviously what's happened there is there's been so many layoffs across, and I'll use South Africa because South Africa has been particularly hard hit by COVID. And a lot of our listeners will know this already. All the lodges are closed, and they have been for many months, and we're so reliant on the dollar to employ all of our staff, and so all these layoffs are happening, and there's a lot of unemployment, and of course these communities in the rural areas on the borders of these wildlands need to eat. If there's no food, what are they going to do? I know what I would do. You're gonna go hunting, and you're gonna poach, and you're gonna do what you got to do to keep your family alive. So there's a massive feeding program that we're involved with now. We've got quite a substantial amount of funding out of Aqua to feed those communities. So that's the position that we're in now. But it's a tipping point for Africa, and I'm going to go on a mission now very shortly when I launch Natural Born Runners to say to the British public, you guys love Africa, you go there on holiday and everything else, but I tell you what, Africa is going to eat itself if we don't start helping it, and there won't be a safari to go on. So get behind us. You're coming out of COVID here. I know it's all about survival here, but we're going to need your help big time in Africa. And so that's my next sort of mission.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's amazing. Hayley, I just wanted to know what's next for you. You might have to unmute yourself. We have a hand. There we go. So what's next for you? Because you also, not only have you helped a lot of these ladies find confidence and, you know, feel inspired and feel comfortable in their skin, but you're also working on other little initiatives and bringing people together. But what I absolutely love about you is that you run a business which is completely bizarre to us in the UK as well. You run it on WhatsApp. How does that work? Because I would think that people would want to go to a fancy, you know, website and buy their stuff online.
I think it's down to my demographic. So my demographic is older, and we always joke that they'll go, my son-in-law told me to never put my details in a computer, but I'll send them my banking details and they'll pay me via EFT. Is that not putting your details into a computer? But anyway, it works for me. You know, 3 years ago, I got a range of jackets into the store and I was trying them on. And I said to my hubby, I said, these jackets are so stunning. How am I going to get all my clients to know that this is like, they have to have this jacket for winter? And I said to video me. And I mean, let me tell you that was the last thing I was ever confident about, was being on video. I said, just video me. And he said, me video you? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do a video. And I just went out and I said, I've made these jackets. They're really stunning. And I know you ladies are going to love them. Message me if you're interested. And I sent the video one by one to like about 150 clients. And I just got this barrage of response. And they all just wanted to buy the jackets. And I was like, well, this looks quite easy. Okay, fast forward 3 years. I have 600 women on 3 WhatsApp lists. I spend my entire life on WhatsApp, and I do the videos. So it's me and my store manageress. I sometimes pull her in. I even had my hubby, who is a 6'2" ex-rugby player, model a gown. And I said, I'm sending this video to the 600 ladies. He said, please don't do that. I said, I'm going to do it. They need to see that they can buy a gown for their big Afrikaans husbands, because nobody's making those kind of things. It was a dressing gown. Anyway, I sent the video. You cannot believe what it just initiated. But I've sold like a bunch of gowns to their sons. Hi, my son is 6'7". Can you make it 30 centimeters longer? I'm like, I can do whatever you want because I have my own factory, so I can do that. So yeah, I'm selling on WhatsApp, and I have to say that it's my real happy place. And I generate, at the moment, because of COVID, I'm actually generating about, I'd say 90% of my sales, and I sell out. So like it's wonderful. It's almost like there's a ticker going, and like in 7 minutes, I've like sold out. It's like, and now my sales lady's like, don't you want to write down the times? Because like she wants to see, like, did you sell out in 5 minutes? I'm like, no, I didn't sell out in 5 minutes. I sold out in 7 minutes. But yeah, we're doing it all via WhatsApp. We live in the smartest world. And if you just know how to work it for you and for your business, I'm telling you, WhatsApp is really, listen, in South Africa, WhatsApp is huge because it's affordable, and it's the way we do it. So South Africa, well, the African continent, actually, in India, we're very big into WhatsApp, and I do everything on WhatsApp. So
wow,
yeah,
that's
it's
amazing.
That's
I'm so pleased you found what works for your customers, because that's the other thing you've got to do, Thank you to Nick Stadlin for sending in a message. He said, he wanted everyone to know that Stuart is still working tirelessly and has been for decades to help the cause of making South Africa fairer and a more equal society. And he's been very involved in Life is Wonderful, a charity that promotes the messages of the Rivonia trialists. So thank you, Stuart, for taking South Africa as your second home. We're really quite inspired by that. We have just a quick one here. Renee wanted to know, Paul, you mentioned she's interested to see if Bear Grylls Survival Academy is only in the UK.
I've actually responded to her already because I've got to chat to her. It is in China, it's in America. We're about to launch in the Middle East, and we're looking at America. We had a course in the Victoria Falls, and we still are able to tailor courses there. If somebody or a corporate wants to do Bear Grylls experience, we do that. And we're looking at a partner in South Africa at the moment. So I've told her to follow us on Instagram. the Big Horse
Fantastic.
Survival Academy.
Well, what is this not about if you don't get a follower at least out of this?
Exactly.
So you mentioned Tusk African Parks and the other charity?
Wilderness Foundation. I've replied to
Wilderness
it.
Foundation. Fantastic. Okay, I think what we'll end off with actually is just your final message from you got this opportunity to share something, a message that you would like people to take away from your story. And if we could start maybe with Paul, if you just want to share one little nugget you want people to take away from hearing your story today.
Yeah, I think I was actually asked this the other day. I did a little podcast with a friend, and it was for me because Hayley, you mentioned it. When you wake up in the morning and you can't wait to get to your desk, you're on a good wicket. And for me, obviously, hospitality and wildlife and everything else, I think is everybody's dream to be in that industry. And I've been very privileged to be in that. But a lot of that is Dad. It's his vision and his legacy. And I've kind of been in the shadows of all of that. So this whole natural born runners thing for me it's going to be my little thing. And I really want to do this successfully, and and it's a passion project, and it's what gets me out of bed. It gets me even more excited to get to my computer because it's playing in TV, media, that whole world which I love, and conservation, and then running. So I've never. I think I had 2 hours sleep, and I was ready and waiting to go running with my guest. For that first video shoot that we did, or film shoot that we did, because I was so passionate about it. So
find your passion. I suppose that's your message. Find your passion.
Yeah, my message is find that hobby of yours, even if it is only for a couple of hours a day, and just enjoy it. And here's the birthday.
Is that the birthday girl?
Hi.
Happy birthday. Hayley, just your last little message and your nugget that you'd like people to take.
I think for me, it's been about what I've uncovered during COVID. So I turned 56 today, and I'm like, am I the only person who's actually going to come out of COVID unstuck? Because I never realized that as much as I loved what I do, I was putting one foot in front of the other. And I was stuck. In January this year, I was stuck. I was kind of just repeat. And then I was forced to come home for 5 weeks, and I had time to think, and I've come unstuck, and I've rediscovered my love and my passion. And I think my whole unsticking my stuck, and that would be my message, is to actually sit back and look at, are you happy with what as much as you love what you're doing, are you really happy? And if you're not, unstick it, because I feel liberated, and I'm going to feel even more liberated tomorrow when I close the doors on that big rental, on that retail space. It's going to be beautiful. So yeah, I think my thing is to unstick your stuck by taking stock of where you are. And I think COVID has allowed a lot of us to do that. It's allowed us to just step back, take a deep breath, and it's also allowed us to assess what really makes us happy. Does getting in my car at 5 to 7 in the morning, because if I leave at 7, I'm going to get to work an hour later. Is it really? Yeah, but and I live 9 minutes from work out of traffic. But does that make me happy? And you know what I've realized? That doesn't make me happy. I don't want to fight the traffic in the morning. I actually want Paul's job. Actually, that's what I really want. I want Paul's job. I want to be in the wilderness. Paul, I wanted to be a game ranger. Until I discovered fashion, I always wanted to be a game ranger.
I'm sitting in England, so I'm not in the bush.
You could be a fashionable game ranger.
There we go.
And just to end off, thank you very much, Hayley. Steve, what is your lesson from this incredible experience that you had? Goodness me.
Well, if I could just take 1 second to just say thank you to all my co-panelists. I've enjoyed this very much, and thank you for sharing this with me and everybody else. And the lesson that I'd like to leave is the one where we really do have to respect one another, even if we don't necessarily see eye to eye with everybody. And so I want to thank Stuart. I want to thank the people at Lily's Leaf. I want to thank all the people who really made it possible for me to keep going back and back and back to South Africa. I go back to South Africa every other year now to tape the show, and it's been a powerful experience. And I think I've become a better host because I've become a better listener. And I've become a better listener in part because of this crazy story about Africa Hinterland. So I guess that's my message, which is we really need to listen to one another carefully to try to understand why people are doing what they're doing. And that doesn't mean we're all going to hold hands and say, yes, we agree with everything, but it means that at least we have an understanding of why people do what they do. So I have a better understanding of why Hayley does and has done what she's done. I have a better understanding of why Paul does what he has done and is doing. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Dawn, and you, Sharon, for hosting this today. So thank you.
No, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to everybody for coming from around. Well, we've got the UK, we've got South Africa, and we've got the US, which is fantastic. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Sharon.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks, Dawn.
That was amazing. I was transfixed. I thought I was going to get some work done while I was multitasking and listening as though it was a podcast. I got absolutely absorbed watching your eyes and your faces and your expressions and listening about things that are passionate to me as well. So I haven't got any work done. I feel totally enthused and positive and energized. And Hayley, I have to, some of the things you talked about really did relate to the routine of life. And sometimes, is that the right thing to be doing? So it really, really hit a note for me. And Paul, I love the bush. It's the only place I ever go on holiday, is always to South Africa, but I've never ever been to Shamwari. It's one of the few I've not been to. I always end up in either KwaZulu-Natal or Eastern Transvaal. Sorry, I don't remember the name. Won't come to me at this exact moment, but the Kruger and around the Kruger Park area that I've gone to.
You're
recently.
always welcome, Sharon. Just let me know next time.
I now know where to find you. I'm hoping to go out for the Rugby World Cup next year. And
the Lions, you mean? Yeah.
So I mean the British Lions game. So no, sorry, the total Freudian slip there. For the Lions tour, I've never been on a Lions tour before, and this time I'm determined to do it. And I've got that week blocked saying I'm going to the bush. So you've got a phone call coming. And Steve, I've never listened to your show. I do apologize, but I know Stuart extremely well. I think that never a day goes by, not even weekends, when he and I don't discuss things that are being done and projects that we're working on. I did know his story, so it's lovely to hear it from another person. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. And to those who have not been to Lily's Leaf, it is really worth going to if you are in South Africa. It's a very, very special place. So to everyone who's here and those who've actually miraculously all stayed on, thank you very much, guests, and wish you a good evening.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Happy birthday
Cheers,
to
guys.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.